Saturday edition, a very special Saturday.
So it was really, I don't know, that was also a start to bad habits there. You know, when I do hinges, these one person bought into the side, a little paint set. And I made this when I was probably 12, pretty cool. Then I got,
Want to follow that? Check that out. So welcome folks joining. Welcome to this weekend edition, Saturday edition, a very special Saturday edition of Meet the Miniaturist. Great to see everybody. I love to hear from you, so definitely use the chat box and say hello and tell us where you're joining from. Welcome. Good to see everybody. I can't find my chat box right now, so, oh, there it is. Okay, good. I got it up. Hey, Beth, first one on. Good to see you. Hey, Jolene. How is everybody doing on this weekend? Here in New York, it's kind of cloudy and overcast. It's a great excuse to stay in and watch things about miniatures. It's all good. I'm excited for today's Meet the Miniaturist. Hi, Allegra. What's going on in Connecticut? Hi, Arlene. Yeah, so we're going to do a couple of like housekeeping things, and then we will go right up to our guest today for Meet the Miniaturist. So I did something a little different yesterday. I had an Instagram live event. It was a mini go round, basically very casual Instagram. I invited folks on to talk about miniatures. I think it went really well. It was a half-hour long. So if you're not following me on Instagram, check it out. It's a good way to sort of get to know some other miniaturists in a very, very quick environment. Miniaturists or non-miniaturists, it's basically like mini roulette. I invite folks on as if they ask to. So I click on and we chat. So check that out. I'm going to post a replay of it on my YouTube channel in the next day or so. Look for that. Hi guys, welcome. Good to see everybody. Yeah, and say hello to Donald, who's helping behind the scenes. He's going to put some links in the post. So if you want to follow me on some of my social media channels, check that out. In a couple of weeks, we are going to be having Wendy Littlepage from the Denver Dollar Museum, Miniatures Museum on Sunday the 16th. I don't have a link for you yet. In the next week, I will have it. So again, follow me so you're not missing any of the registration links, etc. And then finally, the month of May, we'll wrap up with a special Meet the Guild. So if you don't know about the Guild, IGMA, International Guild of Miniature Artisans, you're going to want to check that out because we're going to have a whole bunch of folks from that awesome organization on a special Meet the Miniaturist to chat about that group. And then finally, in terms of Meet the Miniaturist, last week's Meet the Miniaturist with Nicholas Bush from Nicholas Bush Photography has been posted on my YouTube channel. He was a great guest. He's all about photography and miniatures, so check him out. And then finally, if you like what you're seeing and you want to support my channel, we're going to put a link in the below. If you want to become a patron of Meet the Miniature series, I'm going to do a special patrons event in the next few weeks. So stand by for that. For folks who are following me now and are supporting this channel, look for that because in a few weeks, I'm going to be posting information about that to my patrons. And with that, I will introduce our very special guest, Craig Labenz. A little bit about Craig. I'm a total freaking fan, first of all, of Craig's work. Like, I'm a crazy fan. I'm like one of those crazy miniatures fans. Love his work for so many reasons, but probably the biggest reason is just he's so freaking talented. So I'm just excited to have him on today. I'm excited to bring him to you guys in case you don't know about him already. You're going to hear about him and you're going to be as bewildered and just enchanted as I am from his work and to hear from him. So with that, I would like to introduce and say hello to Craig Labenz and say, how you doing? Thank you for joining today. Yeah. So glad to have you here. So let's start at the very beginning. We were chatting a little bit before we got on about your beginnings of miniatures and how you got into this. So talk a little bit about yourself and how you got into miniatures, because I want to know.
I will try to talk a little. It could be a long story. So I don't know. It's hard for me to remember a time when I wasn't interested in miniatures, actually. If I had to sort of put a start at it, I think I was about 5 or 6, and my best friend, Lori Harrell, got a set of dolls called the Sunshine Family. And I was obsessed with these dolls, and so much so that I begged and begged and begged my parents to get them for me. And they did. And the wonderful thing about them was they were very 70s and very craftsy. The dolls were. There was a craft van and a craft shop. And so you had these dolls, but there were these craft projects and you made miniatures. We would make like miniature macrame to sell at the miniature craft shop, for instance, stuff like that. And so that sort of got me sort of interested. And then a little bit later on, my grandparents in Nebraska started making doll houses for their daughters. And these sort of big Swiss chalet things. I'm not sure why they picked Swiss chalet style, but I became obsessed, and my grandmother started to subscribe to Miniature Collector and back then Nutshell News. And whenever we would go visit, I would just spend hours and hours staring at these magazines, and I loved it. So, you know, it started to build and build. And then my parents, after some more begging, bought me a dollhouse kit. It was the Cape May Victorian. This, you know, big kind of not very well made kit, I have to say. In some ways it was very frustrating because it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, you know, that kind of thing. It went through a few iterations over the years. And so then
that was the beginning of the attention to detail that you pay. Even back then you were like, not good enough.
Well, kind of. Yeah, I mean, it was just frustrating. It wasn't the way that I wanted it to be. You know, it was just, it didn't come together. And some of it was my fault, but some of it was just the way the kit was made. It just wasn't perfect. Yeah. So then my mom, there was a miniature store in Denver, in Wheat Ridge, called the Miniature Nook. And we used to go there and I would buy supplies, strip wood. I still actually have strip wood that I've hoarded from those days. And they had a club and we joined the club. It was, I think, one of the name clubs or sort of associated with that. But I think once a month, probably, my mom and I would go to the Miniature Nook and meet with all the ladies and we would make miniatures. And the people that ran that store were named Dawn and Ann Brown, I think. And they were really pretty talented. And Dawn made this huge accurate house that is actually in the collection at the Denver Museum, although it's not on display right now, but I've seen it there. And the thing that I remember most about it was that he made a working transom window in the kitchen, and I was just enthralled. Right. And then I ran a few minutes ago to grab this, but Don and Ann used to sell things at the Denver Miniature Show back then. And so really the first thing that I have ever sold, they let me sell something in their booth. And this was a prototype and one person bought it. It was a tiny little paint set. And I made this when I was probably 12, I think. But anyway, so one person actually ordered one. It was kind of terrible. I was all excited about it. And then it took me about 6 months to actually make it. So it was really, you know, I don't know. That was also a start of some bad habits there, I think. But
would you say that is one of the first miniatures you made besides the kit and the house? And like, so you've been making miniatures for a while. I mean,
I really have, with some big gaps in time for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like the first thing outside of the classes that or not the club classes that we were doing. That was the first thing that I ever made on my own. I think that I figured out how to make that box and put the things in it. And
it's like you could have been teaching the club classes. Did you ever like sit down and show them? I mean, because really the skill level is not the same. It sounds like you were at a higher skill level.
I think, but you know, like, I mean, since my mother was crafting and I was crafting at a really young age and making things, my dad was a carpenter too. He was also a real estate agent and a farmer, wore lots of hats. You know, I started building these skills at a really young age.
And that's my next question. Where did these skills come from? Like where? Yeah.
I think my family was a creative family, and they were always really encouraging of me in that way. So I think it was from that. And of course I took art classes, not of course, but I did take art classes through school. Right. Then once high school hit, okay, we are getting into a long story here, but you know, things got, you know, busy with school, choir, I was in theater, but I was building scenery and designing sets in high school. So I started, you know, I was still staying creative. And when I went to college in Miami, Florida, and I was planning to be an architect. And I failed one of the prerequisites my first semester.
Which was?
So that like was not going to work out. And so I really wanted to stay in Florida. Sort of my scholarship was on the line. And so I went to the theater department and talked the man that ran the set design part of the theater department back then was Ken Kurtz. He might be on today. I'm not sure. He follows you, Darren. So he knows you or knows of you. But Ken was really encouraging, and he sort of took me under his wing and he said, well, why don't you just be a theater major for a semester and try it out? And we'll see how it goes. And it was just a really great experience. The program down there was very small, but it was there was just tons of opportunity. They sort of just threw you in right away. And so like, you know, building sets and painting scenery and all of that right off the bat, and making models, which of course was right in my wheelhouse. So
ended up in a creative field ultimately, correct?
Ultimately, I did. So when I graduated from college, I came to Seattle to do an internship painting sets at Seattle Rep. And then I stayed. I started getting work right away doing set designs for some of the theaters in town. And I was even working for the Rep for 6 years in their education program.
Yeah.
I was, you know, it was my 20s. I felt free to do that much of a creative career at that point, but there wasn't much of a way to sustain myself, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
And I opted not to go to grad school. I actually tried to go to grad school. I did not get in. It was a little bit heartbreaking for me at the time. Then I sort of started to work with computers. And a good friend of mine that was a costume designer here in Seattle started taking this computer graphics class at the University of Washington. And so I did too. And one thing led to another. I started using computers when I was designing my scenery, and then I started learning how to code. And so now really I'm a WordPress developer mostly these days.
So was there a time that you sort of walked away from the miniatures, or you continued making miniatures? Because I feel like I only found you a few years ago. So was it like social media that sort of put you in, you know, in front of eyeballs?
There were big gaps in time for sure when I was doing anything at all with miniatures, just because of life, basically, sort of. But I was always interested and always sort of paying attention to what was happening. Years ago, I can't quite recall how many years ago. It's been at least a dozen years. Nolan Pat Thomas taught a class in the Seattle area to make a beach cottage. And I think it was their second to the last class.
Oh, really?
And I should have mentioned also that when I was a kid, from reading Nutshell News, they did this series of articles that, and I know a lot of people online probably know about these articles, but for me as a kid, they were incredibly inspiring. They talked about how they did the things they did, how they did their weathering, how they would sort of create the magic that they were doing. And so they were big heroes of mine growing up. And
so talk a little bit about them, because then we're going to go to the house behind you. There's a lot we have to get to. Just for folks who don't know Pat and Noel Thomas, just talk a little bit about them. But so you took class with them, but what was so special about them?
So they made a series of houses and structures, roadside stands that were just incredibly detailed, and their sort of claim to fame was the way that they would age things to make them look real and well worn. And they were just incredibly artful about it. There's something that for me still, when I look at their stuff, there's just a certain magic to it. And I remember in that class that I took with them for the beach cottage, we had to make a door, and then we all gave Noel the door for him to age it. And he just would take I can't actually remember which tool he used. I should remember this. I should have been taking better notes, but he just did a few swipes and all of a sudden this magic appeared and it was just incredible. So I have always been inspired by them and I felt really fortunate to take that class. And so that sort of back then, about a dozen years or so ago, got me really sort of fired up again. And that house that's in the back corner there is not my house. It's a shell that Nolan Pat Thomas made. I'm not quite sure the year, but for a while back in the day, they used to sell these shells for people to finish on their own. And for a while I believe they made a few of them themselves, and then they started sort of contracting with another guy, and I can't recall his name, but he made a lot of the shells himself. But this one in particular, they did make. I got it from a woman on Craigslist who met.
It kills me that you found that on Craigslist.
I know, it was random. I don't even look at Craigslist, which is funny. I am on eBay a lot, I have to admit, but Craigslist I'm not. And I just happened to see it on there anyway. The story is that the woman that bought it was a big fan of theirs also, and she had seen the kit, or not the kit, but the shell that they used to sell at a miniature store in Seattle called Mr. Peepers, but they had stopped selling it. And this woman met Noel down in Seaview, Washington one day randomly, and she knew who he was, recognized him, because some of us are big fans of some of these other people that make things. I know I am. And he had one back at the house. And so she bought it. He said that it was the prototype. I sent Pat an email years ago now to ask her about that. She did confirm that it was one that they had made themselves. But for me, I just think it is a beautiful thing as it is. I don't plan to finish it. For me, it has value like this. And you can sort of see some of the thought process in there. There's sort of pencil marks and things where Noel sort of crossed things out and cut a different window shape or size. So it's really kind of a wonderful thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say one of the most amazing thing about their structures is that they are architecturally accurate. So rooms meander to other rooms, and that is one of the things that I find so fascinating about their work. And it is quite a treasure that you have there. And it's clear that you're planning to keep it intact as it is, and that's fabulous too.
Yeah,
because I can only imagine what you would do to finish it. It would just probably blow everyone's minds.
Well, I know, but then it would be mine and not theirs. I mean, from my childhood, if I had a dream project, it would be to make a tower house. Actually, I was so enthralled with their Port Townsend house that they made that's in the museum in Kansas City. As a child, I just was enthralled. I would stare at pictures of that house forever.
Exactly what you're talking about. It's just incredible. It's an incredible.
But I think like this house is, I could finish it, but then it would be mine. And I think when I do make a tower house, which is on my wish list, it's going to definitely be mine. So, and I think for other people, I probably will sell this at some point. I think there's value that it's not finished. So.
I'm with you on that. All right. So we would love to see some of your miniatures.
Okay.
I don't know what you have that you can share, but can we see some of your miniatures? And
well, I mean, a lot of stuff that I've got, if you've been following me on social media, you've seen it. Let me think the best way to do this. Should I zoom up? Should I move the camera up on these things? I think
that would be fantastic. Yeah. And let's assume that they don't follow you, because even if they do follow you, I mean, just to hear you speak about your work is really valuable.
Okay.
So
I'm going to switch the camera around.
Perfect. And if you guys have any questions while we're waiting for Craig to set that up, just pop it in the chat box. All right. So what are we looking at? Oh my God.
So this is my 18th century kitchen room box. And this was largely inspired initially by Twin Manors, which is in the museum in Kansas City, by Bill Robertson. The kitchen in there just was really, it really struck me when I saw it. I love that the beams were exposed and there was that staircase that went off in the corner, and it almost felt like a stage set. And coming from some set design background, that really appealed to me. And so when I got back into doing miniatures seriously, and this was really just a few years ago that I started to really take it seriously again, I just had to start with something. And so this was really my sort of jumping off point. And I just said, I have got to finally do this and take this seriously. And so really, I sort of took some pictures that were on the web of that room, the basic structure of the way the fireplace looked and was put together, and that idea of that staircase in the back. And then just sort of like made it my own, I think, a little bit. It's really, there are, I think, definitely similarities. But also I wanted to try to make a room box structure that incorporated some exterior elements as well. And then there is a bit of a stage feel to this, I think, with the base. And there's almost like a proscenium arch here that frames everything off. So the idea, if you saw that video this week on social media, I originally made this pair of boxes with the intention of putting them in our living room on these bookcases that we have. And I wanted to be able to swap out the rooms someday if I wanted to. And, you know, the exteriors of the rooms themselves, all this siding and the architecture, there's not a lot of it, but it took a lot of time and there was a bit of expense involved in that. And I thought, well, can I make these things somewhat modular so that I can actually lift the room out and swap it out someday if I choose? I don't know realistically that I'll ever do that. Right. But it was a fun idea. And so
can you tell us how that works now? Is it too much? Or we'll just guide them to see it on social media?
Well, for sure, social media. I've got the dining room. I've got apart in pieces behind this. So let me lift this up here.
Oh, wait, there's more.
There's more.
Oh, okay. So now we can see how it works.
Yeah. So basically, there's an inner room box and then an outer room box. And basically it's from the top. There's that slides down behind the proscenium, basically. And then there's a lid that goes on the top. But then basically some of the elements that connect the two, like the window and the door, the exterior door, those are removable so that so it doesn't get in the way when I'm removing the box or pushing it in or out. And then also that big hole that's in the back there, I'll show you in a minute, is for a china cabinet that's a built-in. And that I wanted to make removable just because to get china in the back of a room like that's a little bit dicey. Yeah. So yeah.
Why don't we just take a question, if we can? You guys ask questions through the chat. So Carissa wants to know about the lights. Is everything scratch built, even the lights?
They are. The lights I am still working on prototyping. If you've seen them on my social media, and you should go look at them. They are. So basically, I'm making prototypes. I've got somebody in Seattle that does brass casting for me. And the plan is to make them to sell. There are some challenges for sure as I'm figuring this stuff out. I'm going to scoot over here. Oh, speaking of lights, perfect. I can't really get in on that very closely, but that's the chandelier that goes in the kitchen. Yeah. Structurally, I just feel like, structurally, that's kind of the wrong thing to say. I feel in general in the market, there aren't a lot of really good lighting fixtures. There aren't very many people that do them. Yeah. And I have a better understanding of that now as I'm trying to embark on making some sort of more interesting ones. But things like that chandelier, it's sort of a combination of techniques. I'm doing some taps and dies to screw the candle holders into the stems that come off the chandelier center column, and then those all screw into the center column as well. And I'm not even showing you as I'm doing this, or as I'm talking about it. But I was gonna ask you. Yeah. So like, if I can get on this, I'm not sure so like this candle base screws on to the stem that comes off of the center column, basically. And which in theory, I think is a good idea because soldering something like that would be pretty dicey with the wiring. Yeah. But turning wires in a small space gets a little bit crazy. So I had some breakages. There was some challenges. You only see the really pretty things on Instagram or in my Instagram. So not everything always goes so well.
I'm sort of just struck by the broad skills that you bring to the miniature world. I mean, there is the woodworking, there is furniture, there is structure, there is lighting. What's your favorite thing to do? What all of the above, or is there something specific you like?
I mostly I like working with wood and with metal, I would say. In a lot of parts of my life, it's hard for me to pin down what my very favorite thing is. The metal work in particular, I have been sort of noodling on that for years, actually. I've been thinking of these lights for a long time. About 10 years or so ago, I started taking some jewelry classes at a community college here, sort of a night class thing. And one was lost wax casting. I did that for a couple of years, and then also some jewelry fabrication classes. And
here's the magic. I mean, it's all magic, but this is crazy magic. Oh man.
And the teacher of that class thought I was crazy, I think. But really what I was trying to figure out were some basic techniques, like how do you make a casting of something? What's that process look like? And how do you actually attach a metal with soldering? And how do you finish metal? And so all of those sort of skills, I definitely got out of that class. The woodworking skills, like I said, my dad did carpentry. My grandfather did carpentry. I had to do carpentry once I started building sets in college. So I just have been building that kind of stuff for a long time. And then painting, I was a scene painter. So, a lot of it, I've got a lot of different skills. It would be hard for me to say what my very favorite thing to do is, though. But
what are the tools that you're using? Because they can't be the same as you were using in full size. I mean, what are some of the bigger little tools that you use?
Well, let me scooch back here. I'll show you a few of the ones that I think are most important for me. So back here, we've got this right-hand bandsaw, which is a bench top.
Wow.
And then I'm going to scoot over here. Hope I'm not moving too fast.
No. Ooh, what's that?
These two guys are made by a guy named Jim Burns, the table saw, and this is a thickness sander. Yep. And Jim Burns tools for me are like the most important things that I use, and I use them on a daily basis, really. Yeah. The table saw I use for many things, surprising things, I'll say that. Yeah. They're just incredibly precise. And that I think is the most important thing. This thickness sander, I can get wood size down to, within 1/1000th of an inch. It's kind of amazing. And then the table saw, again, like you can just cut with precision, tiny little things, which is sort of critical. Then I've got, I have the Proxen 250 lathe, which is sort of the less expensive one, but it does a pretty good job. It's a little bit piled with stuff there, I apologize. And then I've got a couple of Cameron drill presses. I got a Microlux one too, but I don't use that very often. So those are most of the tools I use on a daily basis. For the metal work, the soldering stuff, I use a hand torch. It's not like a big fancy thing at all. For the kind of metal that I'm joining, it gets the metal hot enough. So
okay, so can you pull together all of those tools you just shared and how it relates to those unbelievable miniatures that you've made? So I mean, you've cut all of that wood to the precise measurements. I mean, talk a little bit about the translation of those tools and how needed they are to make these specific miniatures and how precise these miniatures are.
Sorry for that vibration. So I will say that I don't make every bit of molding from scratch at this point. I still am using sometimes molding from Northeastern. If anyone's aware of that company, they've been around since I was a kid. It's kind of funny, and I'm really grateful actually that some of these companies have been around for so long. But some of their basic molding shapes are really pretty good. They are, I will say, maybe not as precise as they were when I was a kid, but I often will take a piece of their molding and then I will modify it. I'll cut it down. I'll slice off just a tiny little OG curve if I need a tiny little curve. To sort of answer that question, the window, this is the window for the dining room. And this is one of the windows that's got pulleys in it, by the way. You can see pulleys there on the side. If I can do this without knocking anything over,
I mean,
I can see the pulley going up and down.
That are moving that up and down. I mean, that's just incredible. It really is incredible.
Windows a bit, I mean, not to get off the subject, I've been obsessed with miniature windows since I was a kid. When I was making that Cape May Victorian house, when I did a remodel at a certain point, I made all my own windows or started the process. I never finished all of them, but I was obsessed with using real glass. A lot of it was pretty rough, I have to say. I didn't have an understanding of finish. Finish is really important to me now. The way that the wood actually gets finished, I spend a lot of time on that. Yeah. But back to answer your question again, I would say the majority of this window structure is done with the table saw. Most of it. Most of that wood is cut or sized, or the dental moldings, for instance, that goes along the top of that cornice. This is going to be sound crazy, but I placed each of those teeth individually because I could not get, it wasn't precise enough to cut it. And so but I was able to cut very precise little blocks using that Burns table saw. And then I, was able to stick them on there one at a time. But the mullions, for instance, I cut those. I'm sorry?
One of the things that I really wanted to get out of this talk with you was really to have folks understand what makes a miniature a fine miniature, and just to hear you talk about how you made each one of those individual dental moldings specifically. That's my answer. That's the answer. That's the difference, because it wasn't perfect enough.
It wasn't perfect enough. I get a little bit crazy with that. But one of the things that was important to me when I started really ramping up with this a couple of years ago was that I wanted to do the finest work I possibly could. In my head, I'm always saying, like, Thorn Room's good. Like, what is the best thing that I can do? And I feel like I'm at a good spot with my skills now that I don't have that same frustration I had when I was a kid.
Wow.
So, I feel like the work that I'm able to do now, I can really push that and to a higher level. How
much better can you get? Like, what are you're getting the dental molding, which is, I don't know, 187 thousandths of an inch. I don't know what the measurement is. It's tiny. Like,
it is tiny. Yeah. Well, I think that one thing I would say is, let me turn the camera back around. I think that for me, that I am still doing things that I am able to do well. So for instance, I'm not doing a lot of hand carving yet. So that's something that you might not see in my work at this point. Once I start to sort of ramp up that ability, I think that's something that I can improve. Otherwise, I feel like I'm doing work at a level that I'm pretty happy with right now. Even just things like details, like on these case pieces. Oops, I've got to switch this back. Sorry. User error.
Yep.
Okay. When I do hinges, these hinges are mortised into the sides. So, there's a very tight seam where the wood comes together when that door is closed. I use the Proxen mill for that when I cut those mortisings. I have a jig that I made so that the mill goes down in just the size of the hinge, or cuts out a rectangle the size of the hinge. I have to sort of carve out the very corners of it. But that sort of precision is really important to me, like how tight the doors fit together here, how smooth things open.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's just an incredible level of detail, and definitely puts the fine in fine miniature. That's just
great. Right. And another thing for me, like the fact that there is basically some sort of panel represented on the interior of a door, you know, and this is the way that this type of a structure or a type of a cupboard would be built. There'd be a raised panel on the exterior, a flat panel on the interior. But a lot of times you don't see that level of detail. And that kind of stuff is again, pretty important to me.
Yeah.
And getting back to the finish thing, you know, painted finishes, I'm really kind of obsessed with right now. But I take a lot of time with the finish and how that paint goes on. It's many, many layers of paint, sanding between. This is a little tip if you're interested. I often will buff the paint with either like a rough cloth, like a towel, or even a paper towel to get a nice smooth finish on the paint. But again, like it's layers and layers of paint. There might be on this window, it's at least 8 layers of paint to get to that level.
Let me ask you a question. How do you not lose the detail of, let's say, the molding or the line of the molding when you're buffing it down? Because 10 layers of paint is still adds up.
It does, but it's very thin paint. And some things I am strategic about when I'm doing the finish work. So like when the way that these corners come together so crisply, most of the coats of paint went on this molding before I cut that corner joint.
Oh, wow.
Right. So that way the paint isn't sort of gumming up the corner by having to put 10 coats over that corner, and you still get that nice crisp angle in the corner when it comes together. Because I cut that afterwards, and again, having a super sharp, very precise saw to cut that 45-degree angle makes all the difference in the world. I really think that truly, like, having good tools was sort of like a big step for me in terms of the quality of the stuff that I'm able to do and the precision. I think some things with hand tools are okay, but the tools make a big difference.
I didn't see a drill press.
Oh, there's a couple of Cameron drill presses back there.
Of course there is. I just didn't see it. All right, I do want to ask a question. Does anybody have any other questions? Oh, we did have a question about paint. Do you spray it, or is it brushed on?
I brush on. I almost always use these days. These. I'll grab one just a sec. If you're in the U.S., there's a company called Benjamin Moore, and they sell these little pints.
Oh, yeah.
They're sample pints. It's got a very soft satin finish, and they're $10. So not super big investment, and the paint quality is really nice.
Is it acrylic or is it oil? What is it? House paint. Right?
It's latex.
It's latex.
Yeah. And, you know, that can be an issue, especially if you're working with basswood. You know, raises the grain, get little flyaways. But again, the sanding sort of takes care of that over time.
And what wood are you using mostly? Do you use hardwoods?
It depends. And sometimes it depends what I have handy and what is easiest.
You're not opposed to basswood because for you, it's about the finish.
It is, yeah. And sometimes basswood can be really nice, and it's really easy to work with, and it's cheap. So like this window is mostly basswood.
Wow.
The kitchen cupboard, which is that guy there.
Yes, we didn't talk about that piece.
Yeah, this is cherry. And so I use, for some of the finer furniture, I use a lot of cherry. I've started to use Swiss pear, which has got a really nice fine grain to it. And also I use, I've got some really nice fir that I'm going to be using on some stuff coming up pretty soon.
Wow.
Really fine grain, old growth. And I kind of have scavenged it from parts of my house. So that, and back to the whether I brush or spray, to answer that question, I almost always brush.
Brush.
And I think that for me, again, is a detail thing. I want the paint to be really smooth, but a piece like this window or this cupboard would have been brushed. And so if there is just the tiniest little brush stroke there, I like that idea. I don't want it, I want it very smooth, but there's a certain level of authenticity there if there's actually a little bit of brushstroke happening. So I think that's kind of important too.
You allow a brushstroke on your piece? I didn't see a brushstroke on any of this on the piece that I handled, the one on the right. So you're okay with it. Interesting. That's
yeah.
I think it's fascinating. All right, let's take another question. I'm going to go to the Q&A box because Donald's telling me there are questions there. What species of wood do you like best for this level of precision? I think you answered that, right? You work with different kinds of woods.
I do. I think it depends on the situation, but like I said, like basswood can sometimes be very well. You can finish it really nicely. It's easy to work with. And then cherry, I use a lot in Swiss pear.
Swiss pear, that's great.
Yeah.
We did get a question before if we could take a quick look at the Pat Noel Thomas house.
Oh, sure.
And then while we're moving that around, guys, use the chat box for any other questions or the Q&A box, but choose the chat box. It's better for me. Ah, there's that Pat Noel. Oh my
God. So this was based on, I think they called it the Grays Harbor House. And if you look at their website, Pat has a blog and there's a lot of information on there about a lot of their work, but there is a post about the Grays Harbor House. So they built that first and then they turned around and started making these shells that are sort of based on that. The thing that's kind of cool about this, and I don't know if the ones that ended up going on the market were like this or not, but this is built in sections and pieces. There's basically the whole house splits down the middle. It comes apart in two halves. The tower here actually comes off. Hopefully I don't break something there. So
the whole piece, the whole house is meant to sort of split open to view and to work in?
To work in, and I assume probably for shipment. Because then you, in theory, could break this down and ship it into multiple boxes, which would be pretty handy. And then this side of the house lifts off. I don't know if you can see that. So this whole wing here, like right here, lifts off.
And what's quarter-inch plywood, do you think?
It's quarter-inch plywood. I think it's probably mahogany from back in the day when you can actually buy mahogany plywood.
Wow.
I know. But you can see what, Darren, what you were talking about earlier, you can see through to other rooms, which is one of the things that they do so well, I think. It has the feel of a real house, just kind of great.
It really is. It's just awesome. Laura wanted to know, did you make the pulleys for the window jambs that you did? Well, of course you did. But what are they made of?
Well,
there's nothing store-bought here, kids.
Well, I tell you, the wheel itself, I cheated. The wheels are from Model Ship Rigging.
Okay.
They're really hard to find. I need to figure out a way to produce them myself, and I haven't yet. I think the casting them in brass might be too expensive per piece. So I've got to figure, I maybe do some manufacturing thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But the problem I'm having is in terms of like quantity, those little brass wheels are hard to come by.
Right.
And also I have a set that are pretty much the same size, but there is variance. So that can be a problem too. But the mount that the wheel goes into, this is going to be hard to see. I don't know if we can zoom in.
Oh yeah, we can see a lot of the inner workings. I see the.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know. Is that blurring out now? I'm not sure.
It's good.
But that mount I made, I designed it so that the wheel that I'd bought would fit inside there. On the back side, there's not a good way to show this, but the wheel fits into the mount and there's a brass pin that connects the two together, and then the wheel turns on that pin. And then those are screwed in, although technically not screwed, but there are screws on the top and the bottom of the mount. And those screws are from Dr. G's brass hole, Bev, if you know Bev, from the Guild. She makes some wonderful brasses, hinges and things like that, but she sells amazing little 1mm screws, which I am obsessed with.
That is crazy. So what are you working on now? Is there anything that you can share that's maybe in progress? You haven't maybe?
Let me
set that one up.
I'm gonna lift this up. We're gonna come over here. So I am working on, I'm planning to apply for my artisan membership at the Guild in the fall. And I'm planning to definitely do furniture. But the croquet set that you've seen and Darren has, but it's with him, but I'm not sure it's with him at the moment. I also want to apply with toys. And so I'm planning to do furniture and toys, 2 categories, if I get it all done. But one of the things I've been working on, this is going to be hard to see, maybe, but I'm doing a set of dominoes.
Oh my God. Yes, we can see them.
So,
oh my goodness.
They are pretty tiny. So they are made from recycled piano keys. You can see here. So it's ebony and let's just say it's bone. That would be the appropriate thing to say. So there's a very thin layer. That's going to be hard to see, but from the sides, if it would zoom in.
Use our imagination. How are you cutting those piano keys?
I'm using my table saw, the burn saw.
So I was going through that. I guess. I don't even know. What are piano keys made of?
Well, it's ebony. So it's pretty hard wood. Sorry, that is not a pretty view. There. That's a prettier view.
Thank you, Nicole. Nicole isn't telling me what it's made of. Yeah, that's true. It's ebony. I get it now. Yes.
So it's ebony. It's pretty hard. I had to do, one of the things about the burn saw is that if you're cutting thick wood, you either have to use a bigger blade or do it in tiny passes. It can be a little bit challenging with the motor that's in there. So to get this cut, I had to do multiple passes to get it all the way through.
Wow.
But I wanted the precision that saw would give me in order to do that. And then once I had strips of it, I ran it through the thickness sander, which is basically, it's got a roll of sandpaper on the inside, and then you feed the wood through, and it thins it out. So I got multiple sheets of ivory ebony that were, nobody said ivory, ebony that were super thin. And then I ran the bone through and got that super thin. And then I glued them together and then ran them through together until they were super, super thin. And basically they are together, the 2 layers, the ebony and the bone on top are a scale 1/3 of an inch. And then the dominoes themselves are a scale 1 inch by 2 inches. And then there's a brass pin that's 2 millimeters that connects the 2 together.
That's just blowing.
That's right in the middle. I don't know if you can see the brass pin or not, but
we saw the dots. I think we got to see at least some of the dots.
Okay.
Gold on the dots.
Well, I'll put that on my Instagram for sure. Yeah. I don't know if, I think it's not going to be good enough with the camera to see it, but
the guy is mad. Catherine says the guy is mad. Yes, he is. And isn't that great? That's perfect. I think
I'm a little, yeah.
So what is next for you? I mean, was there a plan for you to show your work at shows? Like, I know you're applying for artisan. I can tell you right now, yes, you're in, but I can't. I'm gonna save you all the time, all the shipment. Just yes, you're an artisan.
Okay.
Right, but I can't do that. But what is next for you? I mean, I know once you're gonna get artisan, that's not like a given. Are you gonna show your work? What are you gonna do?
Well, I for sure I'm going to be exhibiting at Tom Bishop Chicago next year.
Beautiful.
So I will be there with bells on, and so that is my big push. Show wise, and I've been working on stuff for that already. I'm making some duplicates of the white Vermont cupboard, and I'll have some other furniture as well, and then probably some small room snippets. Maybe I don't think I'm going to be able to travel with boxes that are as big as the ones behind me, but I'll have some stuff like that too, and I'll have some fireplace brasses and accessories, and hopefully some lighting. And I might. I'm just putting this out there maybe, but I'm not sure it's going to happen, but I might try to do the Guild show in the fall. It depends on how much I'm able to get done by then. But I need to let them, I'm sorry?
This year?
This year I might. It depends on how much work I can get done. And and you mentioned this in the show information, but I am pretty much a full-time web developer and designer.
You got a job.
So
a day job. I know.
There's a day job. So, it does limit what I'm able to do.
But
I am, from a work standpoint, I have been, because of this project, these boxes behind me, I've been sort of very focused in the 18th century. I'm not planning on staying in the 18th century forever. I do love that style, but I'm probably going to push myself out of there a bit.
I do want to say that, you know, don't let it hold you back, because I think having enough or whatever to show, I mean, I think people will want to meet you, you know, even if you're just there to chat with. And the other thing I wanted to say is, you know, I hope you will someday teach, because I think you would make a great teacher too. And I think, I don't know, is that on your list?
I think so.
Awesome.
I mean, I think so. I think it would be good. I'd like to, I think it would be fun.
Yeah, that's thrilling.
With all things, I think I have taken a couple of guild classes myself, both Mark Murphy things. There was a craftsman rocking chair class he did in Portland, Oregon years ago. And then I went to Williamsburg once when he did an apothecary chest.
Mm-hmm.
And going through that process, I have all the admiration for the guild teachers because, and when I think about teaching myself, I get a little panicky thinking about how that gets organized and how Mark is able to have these machine setups, and it's all very, you know, like I know what it takes building furniture myself, making jigs and doing the setups on the drill presses and the milling machine and even the table saw. And to set that up for a room, I have a lot of admiration. So I would like to, but I need to get my head around that, how I would actually do it.
Well, I think it would be awesome. I just think it's all awesome. All right, so let's see if we have any other questions before we start to wrap this up. Good, hope you can attend IGMA this year. So Marcella is saying she's hope you can attend IGMA this year. I would love to see you at Guild School, even just taking classes. Personally, that would be great.
I know, someday.
Yeah, I think this is great. So you know, this has been unbelievably fabulous. Thank you so much for spending this afternoon with us.
Yeah, sure.
So people can follow you. We put that in the chat box. They can follow you on social media. If they have questions, are you open to answering them? If they could DM you, I don't know, because we had some questions about some of the tools. They might have missed some of the tools that you were mentioning.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You can send me messages.
Awesome. So we look forward to seeing you hopefully this year at the Guild Show, next year in Chicago on my list. I look forward to meeting you personally.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. There's so much that has to happen. So again, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Thank you guys at home for tuning into this Meet the Miniaturist. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody, and you know, thank you for joining. And thank you again, Craig. This has been awesome.
Great. Thanks, Darren. Thanks. Bye.